All right, everybody, welcome to BrokenSkullRanch.com. My name is Steve Austin. I want to thank everybody who sent in the questions. It was a hard time cutting through all the fat, but got about 20 or so. Let's see if we can run through them and see what happens before we get cranked up. People ask me all the time what happened to the gold chain you used to wear as a Hollywood blonde that Brian Pillman got me. Still got it. Usually keep it in the safe. I wore it for this special occasion of the second Q&A. So jumping right into the thick of things, Motor City Pete writes in, "You almost crashed into me when you drove the Zamboni. Then you looked right at me. It was the best night ever." Obviously you're referring to the Detroit Zamboni gig when I drove that Zamboni, slammed it into the ring, jumped off and clotheslined Vince McMahon and opened up a can of whoop ass on him. Anyway, I'm sorry for almost hitting you there, Motor City Pete, but you know, because I'm such a caring and compassionate human being, I had to give you that look to make sure you was okay. Glad you had a good time. It was one of the best nights I ever had on Monday Night Raw. Donnie Jaco writes in, "If you hadn't gotten a neck injury, how long could you see yourself competing before retiring?" Well, I tell you what, I probably had a few more good years left in me. I probably would have made it till about, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. I'm 47 now. I probably would have wrapped it up about 44, 45. It would have been time to ride off into the sunset. But nonetheless, I rode off when I did. I had a dang good time. And here we're sitting here answering questions about the Broken Skull Ranch. Thank you, Donnie, for the question. Here's one. Largemouth Kid wants to know, paper or plastic? Obviously, he's referring to bags, like at the store when you go get your groceries. And I always tell them, plastic, please. And the reason being, when we take our dogs out for a walk here on the streets of Los Angeles, we got to use those plastic bags to pick up the business. When they get done doing their business, we throw it in the trash. You know what I'm saying? So, plastic, please, for the kid. Ginger Baby R wants to know, I want to know what happened to Andy, Silent Rage. Good question. Silent Rage. Good old Andy. I don't know what happened to Andy. I assume he's still in the FCW training camp over there in Florida. I told all those kids are tough enough that the tough part was going to be whoever gets out of Tough Enough and tries to go forward and get into the business of professional wrestling, that's when the hard part starts, and I think Andy's finding that out. He won Tough Enough. He won it fair and square. I picked him. I thought it was the best candidate. So anyway, I still got high hopes for him, and we'll see what happens in the future for young Andy. Old Silent Rage. Good question. Slido 1983 says, how many beers can you really drink in one session? That's a good question. And because I'm curious as well, I have 2 cases of beer right here, and we're going to find out. No, I'm just kidding. I'd probably need 3 cases of beer. I don't drink too much beer. Well, I mean, I still drink beer, you know what I'm saying, but I'm not going to find out how many I can drink. That would be silly and irresponsible. Thanks for the question, though, bro. Travis 40508 wants to know, was your post-King of the Ring speech rehearsed or written down? Or did Austin 316 come spontaneously? Well, that's a good question. If you'll remember, well, I don't know if you remember or not, but I was kicked in the mouth by Mark Merrill in an earlier match. They took me to the hospital in an ambulance to get 14 stitches in my upper lip. When I came back from getting my mouth stitched up, I was just getting out of the ambulance, and old Michael P.S. Hayes comes up to me, the guy who invented the stunner, and or at least brought it over to me. Michael says, "Steve, I just want you to know that while you were gone, Jake the Snake Roberts cut a religious-based promo on you. You might want to remember that when you do your King of the Ring speech later on." So anyway, as it was at the time, back in the day, you always see the John 316 signs in the end zone, and I immediately thought of Austin 316, and I just put 2 and 2 together, came up with the thumping your Bible stuff, and it turned out to be a grand slam. It was a good night at the office, and if it hadn't been for Jake cutting that promo, if it hadn't been for Michael P.S. Hayes telling me about that promo, hell, if it hadn't been for Mark Merrill kicking me in the mouth, none of that would have happened. So anyway, it was a fluke, but it happened on the spot. I thought of it right before I went to the ring, and I just let it fly. And as a bonus part of that question, after I came up with Austin 316, I could hear Vince start trying to wrap me up on the promo. So that's when I just, out of the blue, said, and that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so. I just needed to wrap up that interview. So anyway, 2 grand slams and 1 at bat. I got one here from Stephen J. Mosher. Why didn't you go right from WCW to WWE? Why did you go to ECW? Well, here's the answer to that one. I'd already talked to Vince McMahon 2 or 3 times. I knew that they didn't really have a whole lot for me coming out of WCW to go to WWE, just to be a mechanic in the ring. And also, right after I got fired from WCW, Paul Heyman was the first guy that called me, Paulie Dangerously, and he, said, hey, I want you to come up here. And I told him, Paul, I can't work. My arm's busted. He says, you ain't got to work, just cut promos. So anyway, Paulie was the first guy that called me. He gave me a great opportunity and helped me really to pave the way to become Stone Cold Steve Austin. He gave me an opportunity to do that and to work with him and to talk so much with him. I rode down the road many times with Paulie, and he was a good friend of mine. So that's why I went down to ECW first. It was a better opportunity. I knew they wanted me. And, you don't want to call a big promotion first when you're down on your luck in the business of pro wrestling. Odeon Parade wants to know, who in your opinion was better, Steamboat or Jake Roberts? Man, you can't compare those two because they're both outstanding. Steamboat from being a technician, a mechanic, and just being one of the all-around badass workers that I ever saw in the ring. And Jake Roberts was a more economical worker, a tremendous heel or baby face, great fire. Steamboat had great fire. Jake Roberts was one of the best promo guys in the history of the business. His finisher, the DDT, was one of my favorites of all time. 2 completely different workers in the ring, but 2 guys who were really equal in all aspects, just different strong points and strengths, but just 2 top-notch guys. And why Jake Roberts ain't in the Hall of Fame yet, I have no idea, but he should be. 2 badass cats, 2 totally different cats. B. Cofield wants to know, what type of wild game do you have on your ranch? And do you go rattlesnake hunting there as well? Man, we got white-tailed deer, hogs, coyotes, bobcats, dove, quail, ducks. We got just about anything you can think of out there. Do I go rattlesnake hunting there as well? I don't really hunt rattlesnakes, man. I see all these rattlesnake roundups, and they pile all those snakes in a bag, and it's bad for the snakes. They're not happy. They're crushed, they're trampled, they're dehydrated, they're starved. So I'm not a big fan of rattlesnake roundups. Do I shoot them? Yes, I do, because I don't want them biting my dogs, but I don't necessarily go rattlesnake hunting. The Josh Thomas wants to know, would you come back to WWE to face Punk? I assume you're talking about CM Punk. Would I? Maybe, if all the stars lined up and, everything was good for him, good for me, good for WWE. And I'd like to imagine it wouldn't take me over 30, 35 minutes to whoop his ass. That's all I got to say about that. Thanks for the question. And don't you go piping in, CM Punk, because you're a punk. Hitman29 says, any chance you'll sell personalized photos on your site? You know what, I am. Right now, we're hot and heavy on the merchandise right now. We're going for another creative meeting this Friday, get everything lined out, and once I get everything settled, I will offer personalized pictures on the website. Don't know what I'm going to charge for them. I just want to do it because I can and to make them available. And to answer your question, yes. Mark Abraham 89 says, favorite food. Everybody that knows me knows that my favorite food in the world is Mexican food. Beef enchiladas, refried beans, Mexican rice, and 3 beef tacos. And it's got to be ground beef though. They make Mexican food different out here on the West Coast than they do in South Texas. So anyway, Mexican food is my favorite, followed by Cajun food and steaks. And that's pretty much about it on that one. BSA 1978 says, being an actor now, thanks for that. Who were some of your personal favorites that influenced you to go into acting? Well, that's an interesting question because nobody really influenced me to go into acting. I went into acting because I needed something to do after I got out of the business of professional wrestling. It was never my goal to be an actor. It was my goal and my dream to be a professional wrestler. But anyway, so I made the decision to get into acting just as a way to pay the bills and, be productive and do something. So I came out here to Los Angeles, and here I sit talking to you. Who are some of my favorites? Man, I dug Charles Bronson, Steve McQueen, Clint Eastwood, John Wayne, cats like that. You know, these days I like Johnny Depp and Russell Crowe and Leonardo DiCaprio and Daniel Day-Lewis. But anyway, no one influenced me to go into acting at all. Skulls and Tattoo asked me, what was your worst mess up in the ring you can remember? I remember it well. I had a few mess ups in the ring. I remember one time I was working with one of my all-time favorites, Triple H. Can't remember where we were, and I was going to hit him with the Thesz press. And most time, you know, when I hit the Thesz press, the other person's on the run, and I catch him in a surprise, and we just go, you know, in a picture perfect pivot bump down to the ground. Well, I was on the run, and I basically called the spot. I don't try to talk too much about what goes on in the ring, but anyway, all of a sudden we just got tangled up, and there we were. I was here, and Triple H was here. We were just looking at each other, and I was supposed to hit him with the Thesz, so as he's standing there, I just jumped up on him and hugged him like a dang panda bear climbing up a tree. And so Triple H is standing there, and I'm draped around him, so he just looks at me and says, what the hell, and falls down on his back. And of course, I'm cussing like a sailor because I just blew the high spot, and it was one of the most ridiculous things that ever happened in the world. But anyway, me blowing the Lou Thesz spot with Triple H, you had to be there to appreciate the calamity of it all. I felt like a complete idiot. Here's one from Daffy316. What's happening, Daff? She says, dang, what's a woman got to do for a tweet? Done lost 29 pounds. Well, I do better than the tweet. Congrats on the 29 pounds lost. Stick with it and, you know, be consistent and don't fall off and go crazy. So congratulations, Daffy. I'm proud of you. Here's one from Casey Carnage. Boy, that's a good name, Casey. Sounds tough. Thoughts of your time in Memphis. He's referring to the time when I was breaking in, and basically it was the Memphis territory. It was the USWA. And most of the guys lived in Nashville, and the loop was, and we did this loop over and over and over again, was Monday was Memphis, Tuesday was Louisville, Kentucky, Wednesday was Evansville, Indiana, Thursday was the local spot show within about 100 miles of Nashville. Then we got on a bus, we drove all night to get to Dallas, to work Dallas Friday night. Saturday night, then we got back on a bus, drove all night to Memphis, do Memphis TV, got back on a bus, went to pick up our cars, and we parked at the Thursday spot show to go home to the hotel to shower before we work. Saturday night at the Nashville Fairgrounds, then everybody went home, and Sunday we either worked or didn't work 50% of the time. That was one of the funnest times in my life because I was starving to death. I wasn't making any money. I don't know what the other guys on the card was making, but the territory was down. And I was starving, I was eating potatoes to stay alive, but I was paying my dues, and I was working every single night of the week with quality people and having some really good matches and getting a chance to ask guys every single day, you know, about 50 or 100 questions, riding with Dutch Mantel and Chris Champion down the road, and about psychology and all the other things that go into business of pro wrestling. But just working that territory and paying my dues and putting my time in was a badass time. And as we, here's one from Jake Long /73. If you weren't a wrestler, what profession would you attempt? Man, if I wasn't going to be a professional wrestler, I was working on a freight dock before I got in the business, loading and unloading trucks and driving a forklift. Probably wouldn't have gone back to that. You know, maybe I'd have probably went back to college and become a neurosurgeon or a nuclear physicist. I always like splitting atoms. In my spare time, I got an atom splitter out there in the garage, and sometimes I'll get out there and work in the BSR laboratory. But, you know, on a serious note, I don't know, Jake. Things turned out that, like they did, I ended up being a pro wrestler, and here I am as a actor. And so anyway, that's about as good as I can say there, brother. Here's one from George 614. Since I hunt as well, I was wondering what your rifle of choice for whitetail is. Well, I'll tell you what, being out there in South Texas and the ranch that I hunt, the Broken Skull Ranch, my choice of calibers is a .308 Winchester and a Remington Model 700. And you can make any case for any gun, any cartridge. There's so many good ones. You got the 30-30 out there, which is great in the brush country. You got your 25-06, which is great, you know, medium range, I mean, it's a long range caliber, just in a medium kick type of configuration. 270, 30-06, 7 mag, 300 Win mag. There's a million different guns. I choose a 308 Winchester. Here's one from Funeral Fog. Here's a good one. Nice and simple. Iron Maiden or Kiss? Man, I tell you what, everybody knows that growing up, my favorite band in the world was Kiss. But right now, if I had to pick one that I had to listen to every day of my life, you got to go Iron Maiden, but you got to go Iron Maiden with Bruce Dickinson. And that's all I got to say about that one. I love the dual guitars of Iron Maiden as well. And, but I love the showman aspect of Kiss, one of the greatest rock bands of all time. Parlay Quick Six, as we wrap this thing up, do you have any updates on the next Tough Enough? Word on the street is we're going to do another episode, but I don't know when, I don't know where, and that's all I know. I heard we were going to do another Tough Enough. I'm just waiting to get more details on that. And here's one from an interesting person. This is from Gene Mark. How did you become interested in wrestling? I started watching wrestling when I was 7 or 8 years old and fell in love with it. She continues on. Did you wrestle in school? No, I didn't wrestle in school. I grew up in South Texas in Edna, and they didn't have a wrestling program back there. And then she says, P.S. Thanks for housing/feeding at Keith Mark, MRA. The McMillan River Adventure guy, Keith Mark. It was a pleasure hunting and putting up with Keith, and the guy is an absolute pleasure to be around. I had a great time hunting with him and that Shawn Michaels. So he's got the standing invite, as do you, anytime you guys want to come down to the Broken Skull Ranch. And I think I'm at the end of my questions. I did the best I could do, and that's all I got to say about this. This is Steve Austin from Broken Skull Ranch. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your questions. And that's the bottom line, because I said so.